Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Ask Amity show. And today we want to talk about administration of a trust. So the question is there any harm in leaving a house titled to a trust named after a person is deceased? All other assets have been dispersed, the house is a rental, and the rent is split equally after expenses among the siblings, among the children, among the beneficiaries. Each claim the income and expenses on their individual tax return. Is that okay?
So there may be a time limit based on what is indicated in the actual trust. So unless the trust terms state otherwise, a trust cannot continue indefinitely. The trustee is required to follow the terms of the trust, which may require that the house be sold or distributed to the beneficiaries. If the trustee fails to do this, then a beneficiary can sue him or her for breach of the trustee's duties. So as a tip, what we would suggest is that trustees generally have to act within a reasonable time. So what is a reasonable time? In our experience, many trustees fail to understand that the trust distributions must be made timely. So in the case of a good trustee, a trust should be fully distributed within 12 to 18 months after the trust administration begins. But that presumes that there are no lawsuits or problems with inheritance fights. But even if there are assets such as homes to be sold, the trust should be wrapped up within 18 months, never really exceeding 2-year timeframe. The trustee should and can make partial distributions, preliminary distributions before the actual final trust distribution. For example, if the trust has $1 million in cash, the trustee can distribute $750,000 to the beneficiaries first and hold the remaining $250,000 in reserve. This is true even if there are other assets that need to be sold. So it is not a distribute everything or nothing proposition. A partial distribution can and should be made.
There are also expenses involved in keeping a trust going. A lot of people don't realize that. They think that there wasn't any expenses prior to the settlers passing away. So why should there be expenses after? But there are. Unless the trust waives them, annual accountings are required, and the trustee may be entitled to compensation. Further, the trust has to file a yearly income tax return. Even if these requirements do not cause you concern, you will find the situation becomes quite complicated if any beneficiary dies or becomes incapacitated or decides he or she wants to sell his or her portion of the asset. So for example, if you inherit the property from your parents, you can eliminate or minimize property tax reassessment under California law using a parent-to-child exclusion. But if one of the children then dies before the property is ever in the child's name, you will face a more complicated situation with the county assessor if the property is distributed from the trust to someone other than the child. If the trust has not been filing an income tax return and you and your siblings have been claiming the income and expenses on your individual returns, make sure that you talk to an attorney or a CPA regarding the filing requirements for the trust.
There are times when a trust administration may reasonably take more than 2 years to be finalized, such as when a trustee is required to file an estate tax return with the IRS. Sometimes if the estate tax exemption of currently it's 11.7 million per person, as long as you're a US citizen or permanent resident. So if you do need to file an estate tax return and have estate taxes due, and perhaps that could delay the trust administration process. But the trust distribution may also be delayed if somebody brings a trust contest lawsuit. So if they're contesting the trust and there's a lawsuit involved, then the administration could be delayed because the validity of the trust is being challenged. However, in trusts where there are no lawsuits and no estate taxes, the distribution should occur within a reasonable time. We've seen many cases where the trustee waited maybe 5 to 10 years before a trust distribution, and there's really no reason for that type of delay. So once you pass this reasonable time frame mark, you are basically going to be liable as a trustee. So we want to make sure that acting as a trustee, you want to act within a reasonable time frame and make sure that certain distributions can be made earlier rather than later to the beneficiaries. Remember to maintain any sort of insurance for properties if there's any delay, and each owner should make sure that his or her interest in any property is covered by his or her own estate planning documents.
So what are your next steps? If you have any questions regarding administering a living trust, make sure you reach out to a trust administration attorney. You can also refer to our Ask Amity show episode, What Happens to a Living Trust After the Trustee Passes Away, to learn more about trust administration process by clicking on the box above. Schedule a consultation to discuss your situation with our team today. Again, thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.